Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special edition of Parish and Community. For the month of November, we're getting to know some local leaders who serve and contribute to the St. Louis area and to our Catholic family. My name is Tim Plunkett, and I'm a parishioner at St. Francis Xavier College Church. And I'm very glad to host this conversation with our guest, Judge David C. Mason, Circuit Court Judge for the 22nd Circuit Court in Missouri. Welcome, Judge Mason.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Very happy to join you.
Let me ask you, if you could, to give us just a thumbnail sketch of your early years. Like myself, neither one of us are St. Louisans. We both migrated here, looks like both with our careers. So maybe you could give us the early years of David Mason?
Well, I got to tell you, my life has had enough twists and turns that a thumbnail is difficult. Born in Nashville, Tennessee, in 1956. The circumstances were very much impoverished. You don't really have people in America that live that poor anymore.
Wow.
My grandmother was a very smart woman. She had been a nurse with the Veterans Administration, but she had become disabled. And when I came along, the circumstances were such that she was going to play a major role in raising me. I guess I don't mind saying, because I've said it to many people before, I was not born under expected circumstances or within the context of a marriage. My mother wanted to get an abortion. My grandmother threatened to turn her in if she did. And here I am. So grandmother, because of that, had to play a major role in raising me, although mom also did as well. My mom moved on to New York City to go to Columbia, and she did that postgraduate from Harry, where she had become a dental hygienist, and she wanted to get a 4-year degree at Columbia. And obviously she was, very smart and
Obviously,
presented very
yeah.
strong credentials to them. But after a year or so, she wanted my brother and I in New York City with her. So my brother and I would go to New York City. Mom never discussed with us directly the financial problems with staying in school and taking care of my brother and I. She instead chose to start practicing dental hygiene there in New York City. Life, went to a few years of being significantly better, but alcoholism kind of took over my mom.
Oh, it's a shame.
To the point that we found ourselves homeless in New York City. My brother had become involved in a gang. I was headed in that direction. I had been involved in a racially motivated gang fight, because at that time we were living in South Ozarn Park, Queens, and there was a lot of battle between the black kids of South Ozarn Park and the Italian kids of Ozarn Park. And I got caught physically in the middle of that pretty bad. It was that summer 71, that grandmother told my mother to send my brother and I back. Grandmother saved my life. Only way you can put it. She saved my life. So I go back to Nashville, into a Pearl High School, which was a traditional black high school, on the first year of integration. And integration was very successful at my high school. And, the rest is kind of history. I had a good time at the high school. I really found myself as an individual. Went on to Austin Peay State University. And then when I graduated from Austin Peay, before I graduated, Washington University, put both an acceptance and financial assistance on the table that I could not resist. And that's what brought me to St. Louis.
Was there someone in particular who pointed you in the direction of law?
No, unless you want to blame Perry Mason, because I made a decision. I made a decision, yeah, truly.
Only you and I know who Perry Mason is.
Right, exactly. It was probably just the last name. I remember watching Perry Mason I think it was on Saturday.
It was Saturday nights.
And I watched it with her, and when I was 9 years old, I announced that I wanted to be a lawyer. And grandmother told me, well, you know, you need to know something about it. And she made me go to some old magazines and do clippings of anything that had to do with lawyers and put in this little portfolio. And she said, well, now you know what it's about. Then she told me, I have to make sure that I have a clean record and I never do anything wrong, because they won't let anybody become a lawyer who ever gets in trouble. That stuck in my head like you wouldn't
That
believe.
it did. Yeah, that's terrific. That's terrific. That's super.
Really, do all those
Yeah.
years in New York, I mean, it really stuck in my head. Um, but yeah, I wanted to be a lawyer from the age of 9. You know, messed around with journalism, you know, in high school and college. I did a lot of writing.
Right.
In the time that I've been on as a judge, I also spent 2 years as a columnist for the Post-Dispatch.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
Journalism was sort of a backup profession,
Okay. Terrific. Terrific.
but fortunately, I didn't have to go that route.
So when you left WashU with your JD, you had stints at the Missouri Department of Corrections, where you were general counsel, and then spent a number of years with some of the large private firms here in St. Louis. Talk about your decision to become a judge. Did you at 9 know that you wanted not only to be a lawyer, but also to be a judge?
No, a judge hit it about freshman year of college.
Okay.
A judge that I got, maybe it was sophomore year, I'm sorry. It was a judge that I encountered in Clarksville, Tennessee. I went to Austin Peay State University, and she was very, very pleasant with me over a stupid thing that I did with a bad check. And I was just kind of impressed with her and how she just, and I watched her handle some other cases, and I was just impressed with how she managed these things that were affecting people, because I was facing something that could have gotten me kicked out of school.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, she understood that. And and that really made an impression on me. And so I remember telling this lawyer that volunteered to help me out that I'd like to be a judge someday. And I remember him telling me, you know, Dave, you got a long way to go. I can see it right now. But yeah, from that moment on, it was a seriously on the list of things to do in my future. And I'm very fortunate to have gotten on very young, and I got on in my first try. And I have to credit John Ashcroft a lot for that. He hired me from law school. I first was in the Attorney General's office when I came out of law school, and I handled some cases for the Department of Corrections. I left the Attorney General's office. The new Attorney General was just say not a pleasant person to work for, because Ashcroft had become governor. And,
Right.
So I left because of that. He called me and asked me to come back to state government to help him clean up the Missouri Department of Corrections, which was becoming mired in all kinds of lawsuits. I promised him 2 years. It took 3 years, but we took care of a lot of gender bias within the system. Over gender bias, policies that were written that were just keeping the women in corrections down, changed that into a model system for the employment of women in corrections. We got rid of, you remember Cool Hand Luke, right? So we had some people who were like that, right? We got rid of all of that. There was no failure to communicate between the General Counsel's office and how we were going to be becoming a modern Department of Corrections. And then I came back, went into like some major law firms.
Right.
And then, you know, 2 vacancies on the court came up. I'm at the age of 35. You know, people were wondering, suggesting to me, well, Dave, it's very hard to get on at your age. But the committee, they all nominated me. I had all 5 votes. I found out later they did not expect me to be appointed at that age. And I kept saying, you know, didn't you see, you know, John Ashcroft's name just like all through my resume? He was governor at the time. So it took him 6 days to make that appointment.
Oh, that's great.
And I've, tried to honor the law and the people of St. Louis, but I also like to also try to be the person that now former Attorney General Ashcroft, former Senator, will be proud that he put on the bench.
So after 30 years on the bench, I'm confident you could fill up this video until dinner time with stories of significant cases and personalities that you were involved in. But in keeping with the Black Catholic History Month, could I ask you to talk a little bit about your involvement with the Freedom Suites Memorial
Right.
that's being erected downtown, I think adjacent to the courthouse?
That is correct.
Will be opened up later this year.
Yeah, that's correct. And actually, probably somebody misprinted on you. That's Freedom Suits. There were for 57 years before the Civil War, city of St. Louis was something of a, I guess you can say, a hotbed for lawsuits filed by slaves seeking their freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Missouri had until the Supreme Court got rid of it, our Supreme Court, and then later on the U.S. Supreme Court, had a law that said once a person is free, that freedom attaches personally, and they're always free. And what was going on is a lot of slave owners in Missouri and going to take trips to do things in Kansas or in Illinois, particularly Illinois,
Right.
in Iowa, were taking slaves with them, and they would be there long enough for the residency standards for that state to attach. And the argument being that if a slave was in another state long enough to attach residency, they were free.
Mm-hmm.
If a slave owner brought them back, which was happening, they were basically in violation of Missouri law because they were at that point in time keeping in enslavement and involuntary servitude a person entitled to their freedom. However, just proclaiming freedom wasn't going to be enough. They had to sue for their freedom, and over 300 slaves sued.
Wow.
Only about 131, but all of them were very courageous individuals. And the reason is you can imagine the reaction to being sued by your slave, and
Right.
the way the slave was in the class system at the time. I mean, that was, in their minds, it was like being bitten by your dog or something. You bite the hand that feeds you. And you can imagine a lot of anger that occurred. So being beat, being, hurt, being killed. But one of the things that also occurred as punishment is that these slaves, if they lost, were in many cases sold to plantations in Louisiana and Mississippi, who were known to have a much harsher way of treating slaves.
Right.
Much harsher, even is kind of an understatement. And the slaves would know when there would be a discussion that, if you lost, master would sell you down the river.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where the phrase being sold down the river comes from the old thing of slaves being sold down the river as punishment. And so a lot was being risked by them. There was also some degree of risk taken on by the judges, who in many cases would protect the slave who filed a lawsuit. If there was any indication that the slave owner was attempting to retaliate or punish the slave just for filing, many judges will actually issue protective orders.
Wow.
Like the slave owner, leave him alone. In fact, they would sometimes even extract the slave from the plantation or household of the slave owner. And, the only place they would have to keep the slave would be in like the local jail, but they wouldn't necessarily be in jail, but they would just be living there.
Got it.
Free
To
of
protect them.
the pain and suffering of the slave master. But the judges did whatever they could to protect the slaves. And that's why, this is also in a sense honoring the judges as well. Then, of course, you had well over 100 jurors, all white male property owners, who issued rulings against the slave owners, freeing slaves. So there's a lot of honor there. And one of the things that has prompted the memorial is in the midst of this horrendous thing called slavery, in the midst of a nation that had many Americans that didn't even see the slave as a human being, we had this court that had this law where the legal system was saying, okay, this law is here. We are going to make sure the courthouse door is open, even to the slave, and they will get the rights that the law says they're entitled to. These
Wow.
became some of the very first, if not the first, civil rights lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
Black people were suing for this civil right. In this case, the most fundamental of our civil rights, the right to be free.
Mm-hmm. That's terrific. I also noticed that in your CV that you have been on the board of St. Patrick's Center.
That is correct. I served
St. Patrick's Center, which is known to everybody at College Church. Could you talk a little bit about your experience up on Tucker Boulevard?
Well, that was an outstanding experience. The founder, I worked with her on some other board, and she sort of recruited me. And you know her history. I mean, incredible work to create St. Patrick's Center. And when I got in, a gentleman, last name was Buck, not actually in our local Buck family, but had the same name. He really moved us to a higher level.
Mm-hmm.
It was incredible to be a part of that. I learned so much. I simultaneous to being on that board, I was also on what became the Regional Housing and Community Development Alliance, which was centered around the development of low-income housing here in
Right.
the region. So I was really happy to sometimes have a merger of programs or partnerships, if you will, that helped some of the folks who came into the St. Patrick Center, then go into transitional housing. Interestingly enough, I was also on the board of Hope House Transitional Housing.
Wow.
You can see how this is working, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. This is
And,
quite a commitment.
to make it even more interesting, all right, on the board of Habitat for Humanity. So yes, there are people who went into St. Patrick's, who go to the transitional housing, would work with either us in finding an apartment, us meaning Regional House Community Development Alliance and
Right.
some of the properties we had, would come into an apartment, and while they were in that apartment, we'll work with Habitat for Humanity to move
For their own
to a home. There were a
That's
few families like that
That's terrific.
I really took a lot of pride in. I got to tell you.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful. Final question is, who are some of the holy men and women who've inspired you? Either, saints or people still that have been, that are still with us, but who have inspired you to be so involved with the community and to be such a champion for the underdog.
You probably have no doubt heard some of the humor of, his name eludes me now, the comedian who often talks about growing up in a Catholic church, Carlin.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Corpus Christi Catholic School in New York City. Well, I went to that school as well. And Father Case at that school really was one who began to really make me see the bigger world beyond myself. When I went back to Nashville, I wasn't that active in a parish until I found myself at St. Alphonsus Liguori and their father, Maurice Nutt. And Father Maurice Nutt had a similar passion of mine, the issue of housing. And we formed an organization. We formed a not-for-profit, a Grand Center Redevelopment Corporation. And the whole point was housing in the area around the church. And if you look to the area known as Renaissance Place, I can tell you that we all had a hand in all of that being developed. And a lot sprung from that. Mike McMillan sprung from that group. Sal Martinez sprung from that group.
Oh, wonderful.
Exactly. And, and so a lot occurred from that group of 10 to 15 people that Father Nutt put together when we formed the Grand Rock Community Development Association.
That's terrific.
And a lot was done in that area to try to develop housing. And I love going through the Renaissance Place area and see that the lawns are all still looking nice and the homes are looking nice and, all of that stuff. When the Hope 6 project was done, that Hope 6 steering committee had several of us on it. So that Hope 6, incidentally, is a project that the federal government had and, that was involved in tearing down old style housing projects and replacing it with mixed income housing. If you're familiar with the old Bluemeyer housing project that used to be next to St. Alphonsus, it was under the auspices of a Hope 6 program that the Bluemeyer buildings went down and then all of that development occurred. And to this day, still nice looking homes, the tenants run it, and boy, are they tough on keeping things nice.
That's wonderful.
And safe.
That's great.
And that, quite frankly, I have to tell you, sprung principally from the vision of Father Maurice Nutt. He convened us, he got us together, he put forth that vision and motivated all of us to use our connections, our influences, our voice on behalf of the tenants, on behalf of the region. And, we took that voice everywhere. I mean, I was in Senator Bond's office in DC talking about these matters. Father Nutt sprang that. He inspired me a lot. He made me realize that, a small group of people can really get something done if they're committed.
Right. That's terrific. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time. I just want to thank you so much for being part of our celebration of Black Catholic History Month, and wish you continued success in your both professional and your personal life. And please give my best to Judge Sullivan.
Both Sullivans are. I most assuredly will.